This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at FULFILLRITE.com. What up? Salvador Briggman here with the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Thank you for tuning into this show today. And on this show, I bring on people who have successfully raised money with crowdfunding. And today's episode in particular, I brought on an entrepreneur who, with him and his team, have raised over $1 million with his first successful Kickstarter campaign and over $600,000 with his recent campaign on Kickstarter. So with this interview, he goes into not only how he did that and how he got attention and really how anyone else out there can do the same thing, what you need to do if you want to prepare for a successful Kickstarter campaign, but he also talks about something that a lot of people don't do, but that was responsible for a massive amount of his success. And that, of course, is reaching out to journalists and reaching out to publications. So he talks about all of that kind of stuff, the impact that had, how you can do the same thing. And if you are interested in raising money with a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, you're just going to pretty much hear from someone who's not only had a lot of success, who didn't really anticipate it, but also what they would recommend for you personally. Like if they were talking to you right now, you were having a conversation, this is exactly what they would tell you. So I think we're really privileged today to hear from $1 million quote unquote Kickstarter campaigner. You know how I love to sort of hype this up, but it's just because I'm so excited. This is an amazing point in history where you can literally get funding for a project, you can get funding for a new business, and you can get the word out there. And not only that, you can create something from scratch and you can get it into the hands of all of these people around the world. Like, it's phenomenal to me that that now exists. This is something that people are doing daily. This is something that is still happening and is going to happen for many years in the future. So if you've been putting off launching a campaign or you're even in the middle of one right now, I want you to use this episode for encouragement. And I also want you to look to the teachings that this entrepreneur has shared with you today and really try to embody that. You have to take action after you listen to this show. Of course, I invite you to dive into some of the other podcast episodes that I have. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button so you'll get a notification when new podcasts come out. I also do YouTube and I get these intros confused sometime. I put out a lot of great information and I usually try to make it very comprehensive, very actionable, and something that you can implement for your own project. That's sort of where my blog, crowdcrux.com, the YouTube channel, and also this podcast, those are the values that I have that sort of are underlie the bedrock of information that I put out there. Now, I also have other resources that actually not many people know about. So, for example, Kickstarterforum.org. This is a free online resource where you can go and you can network with other campaign creators. You can actually talk with other people who are currently running Kickstarter campaigns, and lots of people, over 7,000 to be exact, have actually shared what's worked for them in this community. So when you go to Kickstarterforum.org, I set this up, I think it was 2013, and it's just over the years continued to be a great source of knowledge, of learning, of helping, and of sharing. So if you want to gain access to that, just go to Kickstarterforum.org, click register, and you'll be able to register for free and join my community there, and also a lot of other people that are running campaigns and have great advice for you. Without further ado, let's get into today's podcast episode. Omar, welcome to the podcast. I am excited to have you on. You've had two massive Kickstarter campaigns. Your first one for the Miso Cooking Sharp raised over $1 million on Kickstarter from over 13,000 backers. That is super impressive. And then your most recent campaign for your cookingware product raised over $600,000. I was looking actually in the food category on Kickstarter. There are like over 24,000 projects. And I think you guys, both of your products are basically in the top 10. One is like around the 7 mark, the other's at 11. So you can basically say top 10 for these two campaigns. And that's astounding. So excited to have you on. Looking forward to getting into the product, your story, all of that kind of stuff. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here.
I mean, we really appreciate you too, because I think it's honestly a privilege to be able to speak with you. The level of success that you've seen is astounding. I really want to kind of bring this back first to the first campaign that you launched on Kickstarter. Did you expect it to get this amount of funding? What were you doing before Kickstarter entered your life and you launched this campaign?
So for the first question, certainly did not expect for the first campaign the level of success that we had and the response that we had. Certainly hoped for it, as I think a lot of people do, but definitely did not anticipate how incredible the experience would end up becoming. Before that, had thought that for this industry, the kitchenware industry in which Miso operates, it's just a really stale, boring old industry that needed a bit of a shakeup. You'd seen a lot of other really incredible companies going direct to consumers and offering better products at better pricing. And for some strange reason, no one had done this in the kitchenware industry. And so after a good bit of fooling around the industry, talking to an incredible number of people, visiting tons of factories, I thought there could be an incredible opportunity to make home cooks' lives better by offering them meaningfully better tools at better prices, because really good kitchen tools make cooking so much more fun. It's just, until you do it, you just truly can't fathom how much a sharp knife improves your experience in the kitchen, or a good pan helps cook stuff better. And so what we wanted to do is to really bring these amazing tools to people. And Kickstarter, while not brand new, is still in its infancy in helping companies launch, and we thought that could be an incredible channel to see if people really felt the same way as we did. And so for the first campaign, worked our hinds off getting ready for the launch, and fortunately had an incredible initial success, and have sort of ridden that from day one to where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, your first project had a $25,000 goal, just to put this into perspective, and you like instantly surpassed that. Looking at KickTrack right now, you got $200,000 just about on your first day, and it just kind of went up and up and up. So I think you really discovered a pocket of people that feel the same way you do, particularly about quality cookingware, particularly about maybe not getting the best kind of products out there. Are you like sort of the cook? Are you the person who is really enthusiastic about cooking? Are you the person who's like more of the business person, organizing all of this, the entrepreneur? How would you describe yourself, like your skill sets that you brought to the project?
I think we all wear a ton of hats, and cooking is my number one passion in life. Aside from, of course, my family and my beautiful little new son. If I had $1 billion, I would do probably nothing but cook all day. And so while we do wear many hats, and all of us are kind of the entrepreneur and the business person, we're also all the cooks. And ultimately, we're not just people making products for the sake of making products to sell things. Like we use our products, we love them, we test them, and we're the first line of figuring out if what we're making is actually worth telling other people about or not. And I think that goes for everyone else here.
And how did you actually meet the other co-founders that are a part of the team? I think it's difficult, honestly, to put together a team of people that are not only passionate about the same thing, but also have complementary skill sets. How did you guys link up?
Yeah, I think there's an expression, which I'll butcher because I always screw up expressions.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah, exactly. Great people make great products. It's hard to find people that, to your point, are aligned with your mission, that have complementary skill sets. And, in the New York ecosystem, there's just so many talented people of all walks, in particular in the food community. And, I've been fortunate enough to, whether it's any random meetup events or sort of larger presentations, just been pretty active to try to, frankly, just be around other really talented individuals. And that's where I ended up syncing up with the Meeson team, and have evolved over time. But if you're into food, every city these days is great. New York remains particularly awesome.
Yeah, I also second that. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and just the level of talent and so many people doing interesting things, and also everything food related. I can see why that would sort of be like a hotbed of activity for finding other people enthusiastic about that. At the same time, we've had people on the podcast who literally aren't near any kind of big metropolitan area, but they also are successful on Kickstarter. So you don't necessarily have to be near one, but I do think it helps. I think the other thing that really helps, one of the recurring themes I've seen by doing this show, is it really helps when you can see projects that are similar to yours. But looking at some of the other cooking products, like I haven't seen too many other knives that have done as well as your project. Did you have any to look at that you were sort of aspiring towards with your campaign, or was this just kind of like, this is an entirely new category for you?
Within Kickstarter, there are certain, as you know very well, there are certain products that are sort of tried and true, and for the ecosystem, you kind of know that if you sell the right thing with the right story, and if you have a really good product on your hands, like it'll do well. Wallets and sort of key fobs, and especially board games, and those always do super well on Kickstarter. There's tons of incredible products. When we launched, there were a few other knife campaigns that had been on the platform, but not that many. And so to some degree, we were kind of launching into the unknown, which, is a little bit nerve-wracking.
It's exciting,
not
though.
Knowing. It is all of these things, as many creators have sort of had that rush of both fear and excitement. We didn't have a lot to comp against in terms of what we could expect. And so treading into the unknown, certainly. But it is exciting.
And with that initial goal for your first campaign, I think it was $25,000 goal. Usually, I could, you might hope for $50K or $100K. What did it feel like when literally on the first day you hit the $200K mark, and pretty much within the first week you went to $400K? What did that feel like to you as a team? For you personally, what did it feel like?
To be perfectly honest, it was a bit surreal. It just, there are moments when you hope for the best, and when they happen, then things are fantastic. This was to a point of beyond sort of validation, and more into, whoa, we have so much work to do ahead of us. And so it was thrilling, but also sort of humbling, in as much as we had a responsibility to actually live up to, frankly, the hype that we found day one right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're very right. That's 13,000 people that you now have to send this product out to, and that you're responsible for customer support and all of these things. So I can also sort of see both sides of that. And particularly with this project, and when you're sort of discovering this launch and this desire, this demand for your product, were you doing anything leading up to the launch that you could share with the listeners in terms of trying to give it sort of the best chance that you could have? Were you doing anything like advertising? Were you doing anything like building an email list, or anything you could pass on to them with this first campaign that made it more successful?
Yeah, I think that's probably the single most important question that I get asked from people. And I think it is the single largest area that a lot of people fall down heading into Kickstarters, in my opinion. There's a lot of amazing Kickstarter projects that get launched, gorgeous campaign pages, the messaging is perfect, the product's right, the price is right, but it's one of these, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around, it's tough. It's more competitive than it ever has been. There's more stuff competing for our attention on multiple platforms. And so anyone that's launching, you may get lucky, you may be the next potato salad, but you probably will have to hustle your way to finding something that works. And so in our case, we had a very extended ground game leading up to our first Kickstarter campaign. We tried a lot of stuff that worked. We tried a lot of stuff that didn't work. And we made do with what we had. We were not well funded. We had, I think, a total of maybe 10 sample knives that we were able to get into the hands of the media, which fortunately worked out very well. But we worked very hard at a grassroots level to try to build some buzz. Unfortunately, some of those activities paid off. That is in a macro sense, the single biggest thing I would advise all new campaign creators is to start well in advance of when you think you need to, and to start, if not marketing, meeting people in your space ahead of time to get the word out there. Every single campaign needs to try to increase its chance of success because it's really hard to break through these days.
When talking about that ground game, what exactly were you doing? What were you doing that worked? And also maybe you could share one thing that didn't work, just so that people know that like everything you touch doesn't necessarily turn to gold here, even though you've had 2 great campaigns. What were you doing with that ground game specifically?
In a general sense, I would say to people who, in order for them to not get discouraged, most stuff won't work. And that's just acknowledging that ahead of time is a very positive thing, and yet you still have to really focus and try. For us, there's a huge food community that we really wanted to tap into, and not in a transactional way, not in a, hey, we're making this, so write about it, tell people about it. One of the reasons why we wanted to go on Kickstarter is because it really is almost, I wouldn't say it's less about the funds; those are sort of a necessary requirement to creating the physical product, but the most valuable thing is connecting with a community of like-minded people. And that's what we really tried to do in our initial outreach. Unfortunately, through social media, through food bloggers, through food Instagrammers, it's easier than it ever has to find those people and to just build an honest relationship and tell them, hey, we're Meeson, this is what we're trying to do. We're going to be launching a Kickstarter in a few months. We'd love your opinion on what we're doing. Without expecting a single thing in return. Now, to be clear, it's hard to track the efficacy of all that, but it's just the right thing to do. At least in our case, we thought it was. And so for a particular channel, for whatever project that you're in, figuring out those people, that community well in advance and trying to build an honest relationship well ahead of time, I think will pay dividends to anyone. And I think waiting till the last second is also something that people really need to avoid. And, yesterday was election day, and I was listening to a podcast, and they were sort of describing, influential people getting courted last minute by candidates. And people can smell BS. And if you reach out to someone last second to say, hey, this is me, I need XYZ, that doesn't feel good. And I think what does feel good is within your community, engaging people early in an honest way, whether that's bloggers, media, reporters, whomever. If you have an interesting story to tell, other people will be interested in. You do not have to have a polished, finished product. That is where I've also seen a lot of people fall down. Start as early as humanly possible in building your community. I think that advice goes across the board for everyone.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about, social media and networking, also reaching out to these bloggers, these influencers and publishers before you need to ask something of them, really building that relationship and showing them the quality of the product. Did you do any kind of like in-person events or go to any events in New York City to show off the product? I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to my friends at The Gadget Flow. Their product discovery platform reaches 22 million people per month. They've helped more than 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns thus far, and they have a social media following of more than 700,000 followers. If you want to gain access to their marketplace and list your own product, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today.
For our first one, we had intended to. We did not get around to it, in part because we were sort of just working around the clock.
I can imagine, yeah.
Get everything done. And so in hindsight, I would have loved to. Didn't end up happening, although I think that is a great thing to do. 100%.
I also think so too. That, I mean, that's great because you can show people the product, you can gauge the reactions, that kind of stuff. The last question I want to ask you about this first project was in terms of the fulfillment aspect, and you kind of touched on that earlier. I think we look at a campaign like yours and like, oh wow, he raised $1 million on Kickstarter. Like, that's so impressive. But at the same time, then you have to ship this product out to those 13,000 backers, those 13,000 people around the world. Do you have any advice or any thoughts on the fulfillment aspect for this project and really what it was like to go through that?
Yeah, I think it's a good problem to have, although it can lead to some tricky situations when you're met with unexpected success. And so putting that aside, getting as much information as you can about the full picture of what it takes to, in the case of a physical products company, get that product to someone with ample time and a buffer for costs is crucial. I think a lot of people are optimistic about how much time it will take and how much it will cost to produce something. And I think while things may turn out that way, I think history will show that most often it does not. And so in terms of just communicating with and setting expectations with a community, it's really important to leave a margin of safety in there so that when bumps in the road happen, you don't leave people in a lurch and you don't really disappoint your backers. I think that's pretty helpful. Just leave yourself some wiggle room, both in time and cost, and I think it'll make the whole process a lot smoother.
Yeah. I also think that there's something to be said for communication and just kind of being open, honestly. Just sharing as things are progressing, how you're doing. I mean, if you have backers like you did in Australia, Germany, Singapore, Sweden, etc., there's just so many people around the world. You have to just keep them updated, it seems. And I think it's, I was looking at the stats, the community for your project. A lot of these people are also new backers who have never heard of Kickstarter before or have never backed a Kickstarter project before. Were these people sort of coming from your PR hits and like the media? Where were those people coming from?
Yeah, we were fortunate in particular on the first day of the campaign to have a really strong endorsement from a pretty influential person in the food space. And so I think through that and subsequently that snowballing into a few other really sort of notable things, we did have a lot of first-time Kickstarter backers. And I'd say it's a universal truth that, as you sort of touched on, communication is crucial, even more so on Kickstarter. People just want to know what's going on. It's fine if something takes 3 weeks to get to you if you know where it's being tracked and shipped along the way. If production bumps happen, which they often do, they certainly did with us, and stuff took a little bit longer. People will be much more forgiving if you are open and direct and if you communicate ahead of time. If you wait too long or if you try to sort of smooth over the situation, like some people will be tolerant of that, but everyone's human. Everyone just wants to be respected and kept in the loop. And so, if you're the type of person who doesn't gravitate towards being transparent and communicative, Kickstarter may not be the right platform. It's incredibly important.
I think it's also one of those things where when you don't update people or you don't have that level of communication, people just kind of come up with their own reasons. Like, oh, these guys must be like duplicitous or something must be happening behind the scenes. And rumors just start spreading or people come up with their own reasons. So it's just so much easier when you just are communicating and you're being transparent. Even if it is, we're delaying by 3 weeks. Sorry, guys. These are the reasons. They're valid reasons. I think it just goes a long way here. I do have some more questions, but before we do, I want to personally ask you. So when you got started with this project and with this company, you sort of had this vision to create a product in a very stale industry and to do it completely differently than it's been done. What did it feel like after this first campaign, knowing that, number one, you now have this business which is going to be thriving, you can launch more projects? Was this like a realization of a vision you had early on, or maybe you had a job beforehand and then you went the entrepreneurial route? What did it feel like? Or I guess the root of the question I'm getting to is How did it feel to finally realize that vision? And what could you share a little bit of that vision that you had for yourself?
Sure. I think it's a constant pursuit, and I would respectfully say, or humbly, I should say, that the vision still has not been realized, nor maybe will it ever be realized. But the goal since day one was to help people cook better with better tools at honest prices. As cheesy as that sounds, good tools really make cooking more fun. And I think cooking as an activity is innumerable in the amount of benefits it can offer people and society as a whole. And so if we can do our small part by making incredible products at very affordable prices to people, that is a win. For us to generate so much success early on was just, as I mentioned perhaps previously, it felt a bit surreal, but
yeah.
The more important stat to me is less the dollars we raised versus just the number of backers. That to me represents an opportunity to either to delight or disappoint that many people, and so it's an opportunity. And I think it really just gave us a chance to succeed and to grow. And so we remain in pursuit of our goal of just making amazing products at incredible prices. And I'll let you know in a couple of years how it's going. But so far, so good.
So for you, I guess your happiness when it comes to business, kind of weird to talk about like happiness and business in the same context sometimes, but for you, I guess it seems that the happiness comes from really when your customers are just really delighted. Like they have the product in their hands, they can use it, it makes their job better, it makes the experience of cooking better. You're delighted by that kind of feedback from the customers. Were you getting those kinds of messages, or like people sending you Instagram photos or anything like that when they actually had this in their hands?
Yeah, we have a fun Instagram hashtag called MisaMade, and so we're able to see pretty easily how our customers are using our products. And in any venture that you do, you're going to veer into different territories that you didn't think you'd find yourself in. A lot of people start restaurants to what they think is serve amazing food in a very intimate setting, and soon they realize they're not just a restaurateur, they're the plumber and they're their electrician, and then they're spending 90% of their time doing other things than they originally intended. Same thing with the business. Sales taxes, just accounting and every little thing that's taking you away from the vision. It's being an entrepreneur has never been easy, but ultimately there's that nugget of why you're doing what you're doing. And so getting something into people's hands and sort of finding the joy that they experience with it, to me is really the reward. Everything else is sort of secondary. And funny enough, it's one of those things where if you focus all your efforts on sort of trying to replicate that moment at scale, everything else will fall into place. Someone very wise to me basically summed it up and said, I think his exact quote was, "Make cool shit. That's it." And
that's great.
We've tried to follow that. Make cool shit that people want. Everything else is noise.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it simpler or better myself there. I think one of the cool things too is just that now this is a product that exists in the world. I mean, I want to also turn our attention to your second project, the most recent one for Misen cookware, and get a little bit into that and sort of what that is, how that differs from the knife. But at the end of the day, this is something now that exists in the world. That is so cool to me, that you can sort of have a product idea in your mind, you can sketch it out on paper, and in a year or year and a half, you can actually have this thing created and in the hands of thousands of people around the world. That's just insane to me. That's one of the reasons why I'm just so passionate about crowdfunding and Kickstarter. So I want to ask you about the Misen cookware product. How is this different from the knife? For those that are listening, they can't see the project page. Can you describe it a little bit? And what led to the launch of this product?
Sure. So since day one, the goal was to create kitchen tools, not one type of product, but knives will always be sort of where we started, where our core will be. Knives are the most fundamental and important tools in the kitchen. But beyond that, you do need a few other things to really create a couple great meals. And pots and pans, quality cookware is equally as vital. And so for our second campaign, we wanted to take a lot of the same message and ethos of the first campaign, which is, hey, a lot of the premium stuff that you're getting is either poorly made, overpriced, or both. We're going to make incredible stuff for you. Well-designed, incredible materials, great price, and sort of extend into a new territory via Kickstarter for our initial launch, where we had some really positive feedback. And now building more into what was the original vision of sort of all of the essential kitchen tools that someone would need in their home. And that's what we really tried to extend with this most recent Kickstarter, which just ended a couple weeks ago.
So there are a lot of different cooking ware that's out there. I'm really getting a grasp of your values behind wanting to create things that are good looking, that are durable, that are stylish, that also are affordable. Is there a reason you chose to go with pots and pans versus like some other kind of things you could create for cooking ware? I'm speaking to the crowdfunders in the audience who have already launched a Kickstarter campaign, or have actually even successfully run a campaign. And the reason is, I think you will understand this pain point most. And that is, when you finally do raise money on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, the hardest part is not collecting the cash. The hardest part is shipping out all of those perks and rewards to your backers. It is a nightmare, my friends. It's a lot of spreadsheets, it's a lot of headache, and it's a lot of stress. That's why I recommend BackerKit. If you have not heard of BackerKit, they help you collect surveys, they help you collect data, and the entire fulfillment process is just so much easier and so many less spreadsheets when you use their software. You can check them out at backerkit.com and use CrowdCrux for a special discount.
Yeah. What we really try to do is focus on a very, very tightly edited selection of essentials. And so the cookware, kitchenware space in general is incredibly confusing, and there are a billion things that you can do. For our knives, we've been around for 2-3 years at this point, and we only make 3 knives because, frankly, that's all you really need. And while there are a lot of different types of pots and pans and different materials, for us, where we fall back on is sort of 3 pillars of product design, which are, of course, design in and of itself, not just aesthetics, but really creative features, quality materials, and sort of thoughtful pricing, honest pricing. And so that really, in a helpful way, constrains us into what we want and are able to offer customers. And so with really premium, beautiful stainless steel cookware, we're able to put, just like with our knives, a heritage piece into someone's hands that they'll have for decades to come at a great price. And they don't need 30-piece cookware set. They don't, that's just overkill. And so we're just, as with our knives, selling them a really beautiful set of essentials that they'll have for years to come.
It almost has like a minimalistic kind of vibe to it, that these are the essentials that go into cooking, and they're very well designed. It has like a minimalistic kind of vibe to me. One of the things I love about this project is too, despite your success with your first campaign, you still set a very, I would say, reasonable goal with the second one, with a $40,000 goal. And despite that, you raised over $600K for it, but it just goes back to the thinking I think you had with these projects, that you're trying to really use Kickstarter in the way that it was intended, in connecting with an audience and only raising the amount you need to really get it out to them. But despite that, you still, surpassed it wildly. Would you have done anything differently with this recent campaign that just closed up? Would you have maybe focused more on advertising, or have you brought any agencies on for this second campaign? Did you do anything differently with this second project?
The second project, each campaign is so unique. I think you learn from the previous ones you did. You try to, correct some mistakes that you did, but you also try to keep it consistent. And so with this recent campaign that we did, we ran it for a longer length of time. We did it, I think, just north of 45, 50 days, whereas the previous one we did 30. I think that was an interesting experiment that we did. Probably would, in retrospect, have run it for a bit shorter period of time. I think the limited nature of Kickstarter campaigns are one of the aspects that makes them quite magical. And so that was a fun experiment. But, as I think you and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, like they're tough to run. And so
that momentum is hard to keep.
Exactly. So I think that's definitely one learning that if we were to do another one, we would probably take heed in. Peak Design, who is just a prolifically successful Kickstarter. I think they actually have one right now that's a 5-day campaign, which is fantastic. And those guys do really neat stuff with their bags and their camera equipment. But you can only plan so much, and the fundamentals do remain the same, but every product is just very different. Every campaign is very different. And so making sure that you have the basics down, media strategy, sort of a reasonable calendar of updates to talk to people about, sort of upsells, like all that stuff definitely is consistent, and just leaving yourself room to experiment within each campaign is really crucial.
Mm-hmm. The final question I have for you here before we get into the one to wrap up the interview is, a lot of people have asked me questions about some of these agencies that are out there that sort of aim to help you either get funded or help you with marketing or to help you in getting more eyeballs to your project. Do you recommend that people use these types of agencies to help with their campaign? Have you used them? Have they been helpful? Have they been not? Any kind of things you can shed light on there would be helpful.
Yeah, I would say every campaign is different, and depending on what capabilities you have internally and what you do not, a lot of the agencies could be helpful and they could also not be helpful. I think no agency will be able to fix a bad product or message, and so that's more of a lipstick on a pig scenario. That said, certain agencies, if utilized in the right way, really can help people take off. For each campaign, it's just something that they'll have to assess based on their own product and needs. But I would highly recommend, at the very least, everyone explores it, because knowledge is power, and ultimately, if it can potentially help you, awesome. But I wouldn't expect any. I think sometimes people have the expectation that hiring a particular agency is a magic bullet, and I don't think that's ever really the case. If you have good fundamentals, it can potentially lead to even greater success, but it's not a given.
Well said.
But certain,
Yeah, I think that's really well said. You need to have the product there. You need to actually have what people are going to buy into before you would consider trying to blow it up in any way like that, or trying to bring on help. It really can't fix the problem if the problem is the product or the inherent kind of value there with the project. Where can actually people go? I know you just wrapped up this last campaign. You're probably going to be launching more based on just seeing these previous two projects. Where can people go to stay up to date with you, with your products, with the new stuff that you have going on? Where can they go and check that out?
Yeah, the best place for people to go is directly to our website. It's www.misen.co, misen.co. And if they head on over, they can check out the Kickstarter funded products that we have right now, and potentially get some sneak peek and heads up on stuff we have in the works.
Very cool. I'll be sure to include that link in the show notes. And finally, the last question I have for you here, and this is, you can choose to answer this as you would like. If you were to go back in time, or you were to talk to the person who is just now launching a campaign, to go back in time and talk to you when you're just launching your very first project, what would you say to that person? It could be a word of encouragement. It could be a final tip that you have for them, something you wish you knew when you got started. What would you say to that person?
That's a really good question. I think what comes to mind are 3 very brief pieces of information. Start earlier than you need to in reference to community building. As touched on, I think earlier, it's never too early to really start engaging people in your field and letting people know what you're working on. That will only help you. for physical products companies in particular, it doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be perfectly done and polished, but try to get as far as you can into the process, or at least know your discrete costs before you go into your campaign, because it can really help you on the back end, just in terms of costing, fulfillment, making people happy. I think just the last thing is, don't be afraid of failure. Most Kickstarter projects don't succeed. I think in my recollection, at least 2/3 of them historically did not. A lot of people have a incredibly strong fear of failure, just because Kickstarter is a very public way to either succeed or fail. And, it is a harrowing sometimes and sort of nerve-wracking experience, especially in the throes of a campaign. But, it's a very supportive community. And I think more people should launch Kickstarters personally, because it is just truly an incredible platform. And Indiegogo and crowdfunding in general, I just think is such a magical way to get new ideas out into the world. Don't worry about the prospect of failing, and just work hard, and I think people will succeed.
Omar, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing all that great information, a little bit of your story, and also the different things that you've learned running these 2 campaigns. I look forward to watching some of your new projects and all the success that you're going to have, and we'll have to have you back on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified Podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman, and I hope you got something out of my conversation today with Omar, talking about his 2 massively successful Kickstarter campaigns, what went into them, what he got out of it, and the things that you can also apply to your own crowdfunding campaign. If you are a new listener of this podcast, I invite you, please take a second to subscribe to this show so you get notifications when I put out new episodes. I usually put them out weekly. And in addition, if you are a longtime listener and you still have not yet joined my community on kickstarterforum.org, you gotta do that. So many great conversations are happening there. Over the years, people have shared tons and tons of valuable information on this free online forum. It just makes it's a no-brainer to me to not only get a place where you share your link, where you can promote yourself a little bit, but also to share your story, to share what's worked with you, to share what's worked for your campaign, and also to network with other campaign creators, other people that are raising money right now on Kickstarter and other crowdfunding websites. So that link is kickstarterforum.org. If you want to join, it's free. I invite you there. I usually check it once a week or so to see what kind of conversations are happening. So I'd love to also interact with you a little bit. But again, my name is Salvador Briggman. It's been great talking with you today, and I'll see you next time.